may not be the doctrine of Christ. So it's real simple and all that. Jeff, I done had a lapse. Did you say the opening prayer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Eric is just, oh no. Hey, listen. Trust me. Daddy said there'd be days like this. I didn't believe him. But I can tell you, Reed Griffith, you might want to write it down. Okay? Because it's coming. So anyway, we'll do that. We'll see if I can remember anything at all about Numbers chapter 33. How about that? If not, we'll let Ryan lead us in some singing if I just go totally blank. Okay? All right. So anyway, Numbers chapter 33. Like I say, I failed to mark it. Nothing to do with old age. But what Numbers 33 consisted of in the conversation within it was the journey of the Israelites, Canaanites to be destroyed. Okay, that's pretty much it. It's what Numbers 33 consists of. Number 33 not only provides a historical account of Israel's journey, but also reminds us of God's unending guidance regardless of the difficulties encountered. This chapter teaches us about obedience to God's command and the importance of spiritual vigilance. In our lives, like the Israelites, we're on a journey, and God is there guiding us every step of the way. And so here's the map that is taken from, and we've used other maps in times past, basically from Numbers 33, at where the children of Israel began their journey up toward Ramses. They came on down across the Red Sea into the wilderness of Edom. We know they went on down into the Sinai wilderness, and also you see the wilderness of sin, and I'm not going to go back through all that because we spent a lot of time on that back in Exodus and also a good bit in the book of Numbers. The journey from Egypt to Jordan, we're not going to read back through all that because I think we did that last week. I just failed to mark where we left off, so I'm just going to kind of blow through it because we all know the story of what's going on here. I'm just going to read now Numbers chapter 33. A few verses here. These are the journeys. Verse 1, the children of Israel which went forth out of the land of Egypt with their armies under the hand of Moses. And Moses wrote their going out according to their journey by the commandment of the Lord, and these are the journeys according to their going out. Okay, and it starts where they departed, as you can see on the map, from Ramses. Okay, so we find that Moses wrote these journeys down. Sometimes, you know, when you look at what archaeologists are saying about some of the events and places that happened over there, you may find them being off in a third world somewhere or another, okay? But any questions about their journeys, just turn to God's road map that Moses wrote down in Numbers chapter 33. And you know, one of the things that it talks about here is in verse 7 is where they crossed at. And we've talked about that before, about all the different gods that Egypt had, and about how what Moses had done in Egypt with the miracles that he did to try to get Pharaoh to let the people go were attack on all the different Egyptian gods. And we talked about that. They had all these gods of the fly, of the frog, of the fish. I mean, you just pick something. One estimate that one study was done on it, put out that Egypt had over 2,200 gods. So they had a god to everything, okay? Just pick something, okay? They had a god to, and you think, well, how in the world can that be? Well, it's not unusual, you know, to find cultures that have many gods to many different beings, okay? You say, well, you know, in our world today, that's not necessarily so. Maybe not in the structure they had it. One of the last numbers that I saw about here in the U.S. is like 300 major religious bodies under the guise of Christendom, okay? And out of those 300 bodies, there's over 1,200 offshoots. And you say, well, wow. You know, when you stop and think of some of your major denominations, they have all kind of branches, you know? You got missionary, free will, you got first, second, and third. You got everything that you can think of out there. So they're all claiming allegiance to the same God, but are they? I mean, there's not but one God, so here you got 1,200 different religions. Okay, the math don't match, Daniel. Okay, when you do the math, it don't match, right? So it's not unusual, is it, for there be many different offshoots of religion. Here it was like one God of everything, okay? And here you got people trying to bring themselves back to the one God. But when you look at the doctrines and principles and practices, you kind of have to scratch your head, Greg, you know? It don't add up. So anyway, here he does talk about at the crossing where they did in verse 7, and they removed from Etham and turned again unto Pihahiroth, which is before Baal-Zephyron, and they pitched before Migdol. And they departed from Pihahiroth and passed to the midst of the sea into the wilderness and went 3 days' journey in the wilderness of Etham and pitched in Moriah. Okay, so you can, I hope you can see on the map where they crossed at, there's the name of Pihahiroth right there on circle number 3. The wilderness of Etham is right there across from that. What's so significant about that is this is the last God that Moses challenged, okay? When you go and look and see who this was and what this is all about, this is about the sea god, okay? And what it was is this God was supposed to control the sea. So really, here is where Moses' last challenge to one of the last Egyptian gods was. He's going to part the Red Sea. Well, if that is a true God, like the God that was over all the other gods in Egypt, why didn't he stop it? Well, he couldn't. So Moses is showing the Egyptians again, there's no power in your gods. They're false, they're hollow. Okay? The God of heaven and earth and the creator of all things is the power over all. And so we find that this happened as they cross over into the Sinai wilderness, and they're going to travel through it, and it goes down into a whole list of things that tribals they made where they removed camp, they departed, they pitched camp, they departed, they pitched over and over again. Okay, so, and we have talked about that in great detail in the Exodus. This chapter begins by recording the stages of Israel's journey from Egypt under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. As commanded by God, these include notable locations such as Succoth, the Red Sea, the Desert of Sin, Mount Sinai, Kadesh, and others, culminating at the plain of Moab by the River Jordan across from Jericho. This journey represents the Israelites' transformation from slavery to the edge of freedom. So this is what this is all about. They had come out of bondage and were right there on the edge of going into the freedom of the promised land. So there's a whole lot in this chapter about their travels. The land of Canaan. All right, Clipper. This is unclear. Verses 50 through 56, okay? Daniel, would you read that and we'll kind of close this on out.
Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the plain of Moab by the Jordan, across from Jericho, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you have crossed the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you. Destroy all their engraved stones, destroy all their molded images, and demolish all their high places. You shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it, for I have given you the land to possess. And you shall divide the land by lot as an inheritance among your families. To the larger you shall give a larger inheritance, and to the smaller you shall give a smaller inheritance. There everyone's inheritance shall be whatever falls to him by lot. You shall inherit according to the tribes of your fathers. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall be that those whom you let remain shall be irritants in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they shall harass you in the land where you dwell. Moreover, it shall be that I will do to you as I thought to do to them.
Okay, so here we have talking about the land of Canaan and what they're supposed to do. Right off the bat, he tells them get rid of what? He told them get rid of the pictures, the images, the groves, everything. Wipe it out, destroy it, don't leave anything standing. He's also going to give the command about driving the inhabitants from the land as we get over in the book of Deuteronomy. And the way he wanted that done is he wanted everything destroyed, didn't he? The people, the women, the children, everything to start afresh. And we kind of already seen that when the children of Israel early on brought back some captives from the Amorites, and it upset Moses, didn't it? Because he didn't go there and do what they were supposed to do with them. And the reason he wanted that done like it is this is a shadow of getting rid of all sin. This is the physical, okay? This is the physicality of getting rid of all sin. Today, where this application comes into us is spiritually getting rid of all sin. Why? Why does God not want any sin to remain? Well, it's the same story today as it was then. Because he says in verse 55, but if you will not drive out the inhabitants, or if you will not get the sin out, if you don't get the leaven out, then it shall come to pass that those which ye let remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes, thorns in your side, and shall vex you in the land wherein ye dwell. In other words, evil association. The New Testament tells us that evil companionship or evil communication corrupt good morals, right? It's just the same principle here. You get rid of all of it. Paul told the church of Corinth, he said he wanted them to purge out the old leaven and be a new lump. Jeff, I actually have a lesson stuck back somewhere that's titled Be a New Lump. And it's kind of interesting when you take a look at that statement about being that new lump without the leaven, okay? So anyway, this is why he wanted that done. Any of you brethren have any comment on that so far? God commands the Israelites, once they cross the Jordan into Canaan, to drive out all the inhabitants of the land, destroy all their idols, places of worship, and divide the land among themselves. And you know, we saw that was going to be done, as it said here in previous chapters, by the population of each tribe. If they fail to do this, those who were supposed to be driven out will become a hindrance and a thorn in their sides, and God will treat the Israelites as he planned to treat the Canaanites, okay? And we know in the end, when you look forward, several hundred years into the future, this is what wound up happening. God did wind up having them taken off into Babylonian captivity. The tribes were later, dispersed and really destroyed, wasn't they? And so it's a stern warning to us today that the point of all this, can we lose our inheritance? Can it be taken away? Who's going to remove the candlestick? Jesus. That's what John in the book of Revelation says, that Jesus is going to do the candlestick removing for the churches, right? Matthew chapter 13 said, if there's anything in the kingdom that offends, who's going to remove that offense? Who's going to remove the tares? Well, he says the angels are the reapers, so yeah, it can be taken away, can't it? You sure can. Just like Israel's inheritance was taken away. Why? Because of sin. Really, when you look at it, I guess you could say, and there's several interesting points in the Israelite history, that you could say, well, that started at the beginning and the end, but when you look at the big picture, it looks like when they went down the road to having a king, that really started the beginning of the end, didn't it? Really, if you look at it. I mean, they rejected God. They wanted a man-made king. They didn't want the God from heaven. And so, you can see the consequences from that point on. Everything started just kind of, and, that was the end of it. So really, what you're looking at really here in verse 56 is actually a little bit of prophecy, isn't it, about what was going to happen. you see a snippet of that, so. Daniel, can you step in and turn that off for me? I don't know where it came from. Would you mind doing that? I'm sure I can turn it off with a clicker, but I don't know what icon I would hit. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, what about some teaching points out of all this that we would want to look at kind of briefly? Well, it's a historical record. It's a historical record that begins with Moses recording the stages of the Israelites' journey as commanded by God. This emphasizes the importance of remembering and documenting God's work in our lives. So how important is it to document history? This was documented for what? For them, that new generation, but what about newer generations that's going to come along? What about future generations? Because Moses is not going to be around forever. Joshua's not going to be around forever. So what point do they have where they can refer back to their learning? Remember, this is what God done for your fathers. This is how he dealt with that, them being delivered. So that would be something very interesting when you talk about documenting history. Man has a problem already with history as it is, it's documented, because it seems like we don't learn from it. We just keep making the same old mistakes over and over. Well, we should learn from it. That way, if you learn from it, you won't have a tendency to make them same mistakes again. So, and you get into all this council culture, council history, rewrite history, and whatever, that's been tried, okay? When Daniel, Meshach, and Shadrach, and Abednego went over into Iraqi bondage, what was the first thing they done? Changed their Hebrew names into the names of the gods of that country, okay? Then they tried to indoctrinate them with their culture. It didn't work. So, nothing new under the sun, Solomon said, right? Okay? It's done been tried. It don't work, okay? And there's other examples we could use, but that's a biggie. So, God's deliverance. Verses 3 through 4 recounts the departure from Egypt, highlighting God's mighty acts of judgment against the Egyptians and his deliverance of his people. This serves as a reminder of God's power and faithfulness in delivering us from bondage. Stages of the journey. The chapter meticulously lists each encampment, verses 5 through 49, illustrating the long and challenging journey. This reflects the reality of our spiritual walk, which often involves various stages and challenges. Now, isn't that true? When you begin to walk, you're in one stage, you're in the babe stage, right? And there are some basic things that you know about salvation, but there are things that you don't know yet about it. So it's a growth process as you grow. And generally when you look back, and I've heard older people, and it looks like I'm in that category now, based on some thought read. Anyway, that, you grow. Things that you didn't know 10 years ago, if you study, you know today. Kind of likened it unto Abraham when we talked about him from the time he left the Ur of Chaldees until he was able to sacrifice Isaac on that altar. Took 50 years of work to develop that faith. He had some bumps in the road along the way, didn't he? He sure did. We all will, okay? But you got to stay the course. When you get on course with something, are you going to run into some potholes? Yeah. If you're in a shipping sea, you're going to run into some storms. Yeah. And they're put there, Those are things that grow our faith, You have to learn to trust God and let him work it out. So that's very important. And so really to them, to this generation and this future generation of Israelites that was going to come, by having this documented, it shows the various stages and challenges of walking with God. So, it's kind of interesting. Obedience and consequences. Ooh, Greg, did I see a very scary word in all that when I put that up there? A shocking word that, what? You mean there's consequences? Nah, man, ain't no, Yes, there is consequences, okay? Consequences for your actions. In verses 50 through 56, God commands the Israelites to drive out the inhabitants of the land and destroy their idols. Failure to obey would result in the inhabitants being a snare. This underscores the importance of obedience to God's commands and the consequences for disobedience. Okay, so there are consequences that we can suffer for disobedience. Really, when you look at this, and we're going to get into here shortly about some of the refuge cities and God's justice for murder and involuntary things that happen, accidents that happen here in the next chapter or two. We've always seen there's been a structure for humanity of law and order. I mean, God knew when he created man, everybody wasn't going to be a follower of God. But you got to have structure. You got to have law and order. So a lot of these general principles that we see are generally used throughout the world, aren't they? Of some sense of law and order and justice. Now we know there are maybe not really a significant percentage, but there is a percentage of the world that has tried to set up a whole different structure of law and order, okay? But when you look at it, pretty much the whole world abides by some sense of justice, consequences for action. You break the law, you pay a fine. You break the law seriously enough, you're going to spend a few days with the county, okay? You break the law deep enough, then you go into the federal lockup for a while. So consequences for action is an age-old principle, okay? Was the consequences for Eve's action in the garden? Yeah, it sure was. So it's an age-old principle. Really, if you look at it, it's kind of a basic law of nature that's still in force today that God put in order in the beginning, didn't he? These things. So nothing new about it. Consequences for action. And when you get away from... And we know when you get away from punishing the evildoer, what do? You get chaos in society, don't you? And this is what he's telling them here at the end of this chapter. If you don't get rid of these inhabitants, they're going to be a thorn in your side. If crime goes unchecked, does it become a thorn in the side of communities and governments at large? Yeah. You ain't got to let but one thorn get in there. And if you don't get it plucked out in a hurry, what happens to that place on your hand? It gets infected. If you don't get the infection straightened out, what happens to the rest of the body? It gets infected if it's not addressed, doesn't it? The sooner it's addressed, the quicker the crime is punished, the quicker the thorn's plucked out, the less likely the infection, right? The same principle, okay, that God has laid down here to the children of Israel. Look at here, the end of that, chapter 33. Okay? Any of you brethren got any comment on chapter 33? And we're going to roll on over into, where we at? We'll roll over into chapter 34. Chapter 34. So what is some of the discussion going to be like in chapter 34? The borders of the land of Canaan are going to be established, okay? So we're going to see where God has established those borders. The names of the men that shall divide the land is going to be looked at. And we've seen maps like this before. This is just one in a different color, made up in a different way. And as we said before, the core part of all this is going to involve what is west of Jordan, going to the Mediterranean, and this purple right here. Generally, this is considered the land of Canaan. Okay, this is the core part of it. Even though we do know that Gad and Reuben and them, they settled in Manasseh, they settled on the east side of Jordan. And there's a lot of talk about and things that God dealt with them. But primarily, the predominance of the history of all this is here, right in the land of Canaan, Here you have what we call today Lebanon. Up here you would have Syria and places like that. Today, this part of it, generally down in here, is known as Jordan. Okay, this part of it in here. So this is what it looks like in here, and it's going to talk about the boundaries of it. Generally, when you look at there's Kadesh Barnea, kind of dips down below it into the Paran Desert on the extreme south, and up to the extreme north. We go up here and it borders on Mount Hermon. There's Damascus, Lebanon, up in that area there. Now, some of these places it's going to name, these maps here are made on where men understand the location of some of these places being, okay? Could be a little bit of variation when you actually look at it, because they're taking it to, oh, we found that particular city, and this is the city in the Bible now, you know. So, but this predominantly it's where it's going to be. It's going to be in that region of the world over there. Very fertile region of the world, kind of like the Mesopotamian Valley or the Gulf of Aqaba. Very rich, fertile land over in there. That's why it's so fussed over and everything. And everybody wants to own that. It's kind of like a breadbasket of that part of the world. So this is what we're going to be looking at here in chapter 34. The boundaries of Canaan, Numbers 34, brings to light the precise fulfillment of God's promises and his faithfulness. It reveals God's profound concern for order and justice in the distribution of resources amongst his people. This chapter inspires us to trust in God's promises, appreciate the necessity of leadership, and respect the boundaries that's set for our lives. Wow. Appreciate the promises, trust in the promises, and respect the boundaries that's set for our lives. Well, that's a whole lot said in that one statement, isn't it? So are there boundaries that God has set? Yeah. Yeah. What happens when we exceed those boundaries? Well, we're out of bounds. Yeah. In the football game or baseball game, there's boundaries set, isn't it? And when you step out of bounds, you out, okay? You're not in the playing field anymore, are you? Well, stepping outside the bounds that God has given us results and can result in dire consequences in the end, can it? Okay? So, and there's another shot of that map. I'm gonna keep boundaries of the promised land. Eric, would you begin reading in verse 1, and I'll stop you when I.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel, say to them, when you come into the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall to you as an inheritance. The land of Canaan to its boundaries. Your southern border shall be from the wilderness of Sin along the border of Edom, and your southern border shall extend eastward to the end of the Salt Sea. Your border shall turn from the southern side of the ascent of the Acrabbim, continue to Zin, and be on the south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it shall go on to Hazar Ahar, and continue to Asmon. The border shall turn from Asmon to the brook of Egypt, and it shall end at the sea. As for the western border, you shall have the great sea for a border. This shall be your western border. And this shall be your northern border. From the great sea you shall mark out your border line to Mount Hor. From Mount Hor you shall mark out your border to the entrance of Hamath. Then the direction of the border shall be toward Zedad.
Okay, you can stop right there. So it's kind of like what we looked at. The southern tip of it gets down there on the edge of the desert. Kadesh Barnea, down in that area. Of course, the west side's pretty plain, the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. Greg, would you pick up that verse 11?
Verse 11.
Verse 10 or verse 11? Yeah.
And the border shall go down from Shephem to Riblah to the east side of Ain, and the border shall go down and reach to the slope on the east side of the Sea of Shinar.
Let me stop right there. Now that Sea of Shinar is another word for the Sea of Galilee. Okay, some translations may even have Sea of Galilee instead of that statement. Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
at the salt sea. This shall be your land according to its borders all around. So Moses commanded the sons of Israel, saying, This is the land that you are to apportion by lot among you as a possession, which the Lord has commanded to give the 9½ tribes. For the tribe of the sons of Reuben shall have received theirs according to their fathers' households, and the tribe of the sons of Gad according to their fathers' households, and the half tribe of Manasseh have received their possession. The 2½ tribes have received their possession across the Jordan opposite Jericho, eastward toward the sunrise.
Okay, you can stop right there. Okay, so there we have the borders being set, like we have just shown. Kind of gives us an idea, a picture of the location of those borders. So God has set those bounds. Notice it has half tribe. Well, Manasseh was a very large tribe, so you had the east tribe of Manasseh and the west tribe of Manasseh. And so they're going to be the western part of the tribe of Manasseh is actually going to be located in the land of Canaan. So, in this section, God instructs Moses to communicate to the Israelites the boundaries of the promised land, starting at the southern edge at the wilderness. Zin is another word for sin, the wilderness of sin, along Edom, up the western boundary at the Mediterranean Sea to the northern edge, touching Mount Hor. Finally, the eastern boundary at the Jordan River, concluding at the Salt Sea. Verses 13 through 15 reiterate the division of the land amongst the 9½ tribes, since Reuben and Gad and half Manasseh had their portion on the east of Jordan. Okay, so some of this of these Israel boundaries too is taken from Numbers chapter 13. So you have to go back there and kind of compare these two chapters and take a look. Like I say, this map is pretty accurate, showing where all this takes place at. Leaders appointed for land allocation. Beginning in verse 16. Daniel, do you have verse 16? I'll tell you when to stop.
16.
Yeah, verse 16.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, These are the names of the men who shall divide the land among you as an inheritance. Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, and you shall take one leader of every tribe to divide the land for the inheritance. These are the names of the men from the tribe of Judah, Caleb the son of
Jephunneh.
From the tribe of the children of Simeon, Samuel the son of Amminadab.
Yeah.
From the tribe of Benjamin, Eliab the son of Shishim. The leader from the tribe of the children of Dan, Buki the son of Jogli.
Okay.
From the sons of Joseph, a leader from the tribe of the children of Manasseh, Haniel, the son of Ephod, and a leader from the tribe of the children of Ephraim, Hamuel, the son of Shiph.
Okay. Yeah, you can stop right there. You can see what he's doing here. He's appointing a leader from each tribe. Not a group of leaders, but a leader. And so these leaders are going to be used to establish where these different tribes are going to be. Sometimes you look at it and say, well, maybe they should have had put a board together out of each tribe and then decide whether all the boards are going to meet. I don't know if you've ever experienced this or not, but a lot of times when you get more than 2 or 3 people involved in making a decision on something, guess what never happens? You've seen that, haven't you, Daniel? A lot. I mean, so just the relevant permanent people that's appointed ought to be involved. Okay. So anyway, this is the way God decided to do it. And this is the way it's going to be carried out by his instructions. And I'm going to drop on down to verse 29 because of time. These are they whom the Lord commanded to divide the inheritance of the children of Israel in the land of Canaan. God directs Moses to appoint leaders to supervise the allocation of the land. The leaders include Eleazar the priest, Joshua son of Nun, and a chief from each of the 10 tribes who were to receive their inheritance west of Jordan. And this is a black and white map of what it would look like. As you can see, you have the wilderness of sin down here. You have the Sea of Galilee here. There's Damascus going on up toward Lebanon, parts of Syria, so what we would call it today. So this is just a black and white map according and based on Numbers chapter 34 of it. Numbers 34 offers a specific cartograph, a divine delineation of the promised land as God instructed Moses. This chapter is essentially a geographic outline of Israel's boundaries, signifying the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham and his descendants. Alongside it emphasizes the leadership role of Joshua and Eleazar in dividing and assigning the land amongst the tribes. Some practical applications for that look like. Trust in God's promises, and that's very important, isn't it? Just as God defined the boundaries of the promised land, He has specific plans and promises for our lives. We can trust His guidance and His timing. Value of godly leadership. The appointment of leaders to distribute the land reminds us of the importance of seeking and supporting godly leadership in our communities and in our churches. Understanding our inheritance. As believers, our inheritance is not just earthly but spiritual. We should live in a way that reflects our identity in Christ and our eternal inheritance. That's at the end again. So, I think I'm going to stop right there. I know we got a couple of minutes before I get into chapter, wherever I'm at, chapter 35, and then we'll have chapter 36. Hope to get through both of them next week. And then the following week, we'll take a look and begin our study about what is the doctrine of Christ, okay? We'll take a Bible study or two and do that before we jump into Deuteronomy. So I'm not going to ring the buzzer just yet. There's a couple of minutes, but we'll go ahead and dismiss the class and we'll start getting ready for our worship service.